tomorrow over percents and fractions, decimal percent, all that good stuff. So if we look at question 1, they are giving us a decimal. It's in money form. That doesn't matter. It's a decimal. And they're asking us for the fraction that's equivalent to that. So you can find that on page 27 under decimal to fraction. So to do that, we want to say the decimal number with correct place value. So yes, that says 85 cents, but if we were to not think of it as money, just think of it as 0.85, that's 85 hundredths. 85 hundredths. Don't be confused by this answer down here. 85 tenths is not the same thing as 85 hundredths, and there is no such thing in decimals as 85 tenths because the tenths place only has one digit in it, so that won't work. Okay, so the reason that this answer is not there is because we need to simplify. So look and see what you could simplify both of these by. They both end in a 5 or a 0, which means they're divisible by 5. 5 goes into 85 17 times, and be careful, some people want to say 5 goes into 150 times, but 5 times 50 is 250. 5 only goes into 120 times. So that would be answer choice D. Okay, so the next one says Clear Lake Honda sold 400 vehicles last year. So we know how many they sold, and we know what percent of those were SUVs. The question is saying how many SUVs. So we do need to set up a percent proportion for this using the percent box. Word problems like this are found on page 29 and page 30 in your notebook. Remember, percent is always out of 100, so we put that in the bottom right. Don't forget to ask yourself what your labels are going to be. So everything in the problem is a vehicle. So I'm going to put total vehicles. And then some of those were SUVs. And we know the percent, so I always like to put that in first. And then the 400 is all of the vehicles. So that would go in the bottom section. If I cover up my diagonals, I know I'm going to start my relationship from 100. And I see that 100 times 4 is 400. So I can do 65 times 4. I don't know what that is off the top of my head, so I'm going to work that over to the side. And I got 260. So 260 of the vehicles were SUVs. Okay, the next one says the stock market rose 28% last week. What decimal is equivalent to 28% and what fraction is equivalent to 28%? So they're giving us a percent. They want it as a decimal and they want it as a fraction. So that would be found on page 27 under percent to decimal and percent to fraction. Percent to decimal is super easy. We move our decimal point 2 times to the left. We don't see a decimal point. So remember, no decimal in sight, put it on the right. We go 1, 2 to the left. So that's going to give us 0.28 as our decimal. And then for the fraction, remember, percent is always out of 100. So this is 28 out of 100, but we can't leave it like that. We have to remember that we always simplify in 6th grade if we can. And we can here, because both of these are divisible by 4. You also could have done 2 since they were even, but I know they're both divisible by 4, so I'm going to go ahead and save myself some time. 4 goes into 28 7 times, and 4 goes into 100 25 times. So that would be the fraction. Okay, next problem, another percent word problem. So if we see these percent word problems, we automatically know we're going to need a percent box. And if you want to study these a little bit more, they are found on page 29 and page 30 of your notebook. But part, whole, percent, 100. At the local animal shelter, 40% of the animals are cats. So we know the percent that are cats. We also know how many are cats. And then we're looking for how many animals they have in all. Okay, so we have total animals, and then we have that some of them are cats. We know how many cats there are, so be careful. Don't put that on the bottom. It doesn't say that there are 24 animals altogether. It says there are 24 cats. And we know the percentage. If I cover up my diagonals, I know that I have to start with the 40. But there's nothing I can divide 40 by to get 24, and there's nothing I can multiply it by to get 100. So don't forget that we can simplify. In this one, I see that both of these end in 0. So remember, anything that ends in 0 is divisible by 10. So 10 goes into 40 4 times, and it goes into 100 10 times. Once I do that, now I do have a relationship, because 4 times 6 is 24, and 10 times 6 is 60. So that tells us that they have 60 animals at the shelter altogether. Okay, next question. What percent of the model is shaded? Be careful. A lot of people, when they first look at this, they count it up and they see that there are 22 shaded squares. And so they see that 22% and they want to go for it. But remember, percent is out of 100. So 22% means 22 out of 100. There are not 100 squares here. And if you look, this is the center line. So you see that more than half of that figure is shaded. Remember that half is 50%. So we know our answer has to be more than 50%. In this case, there's only one answer that is more than 50%, but sometimes there might be more than one. So let's look at how we would work this out. There's a couple of ways, but if it were me, I would use the percent box here because we are looking for a percentage. They're all squares, so I would put total squares, and then we're looking for the part that is shaded. Be careful because sometimes they'll ask you for unshaded, but in this one, they are asking for shaded. If I count up, I see that there's a total of 40 squares, and 22 of them are shaded. I don't see a relationship on this one, so again, we are going to need to simplify. I'm going to go ahead and simplify these two. They're both even, so I can cut them in half. Half of 22 is 11, and half of 40 is 20. Now that I've simplified, there is a relationship because 20 times 5 is 100. So I can do 11 times 5, which is 55. So 55% is the answer on this one. And again, none of these other ones are even possibilities because those are all less than half. They're less than 50%. And we know our figure is more than 50% shaded. Okay, on this one, it is talking about a percentage, and we could use the percent box on this, but the one that's on the test doesn't look quite like this. So I want you to think of this, instead of thinking of it as a percent word problem, think of it as them giving you a fraction and them wanting a percent. So I would focus on page 27 for this, where it says fraction to percent. Remember that percent is always out of 100. So we could try to make this equal something out of 100, or we can do Tybo and move the decimal point. Now I can't multiply 15 by anything to get 100, but what I noticed on this one is that I could simplify by 3, which is going to give me 1/5. If I know my fifths are like my fingers, I could already know what 1/5 is as a percent, but let's just say I don't. 5 times 20 is 100. 1 times 20 is 20. So this is 20%. Again, you could also do top in, bottom out. So if I do 3.0 divided by 15, doesn't go in, goes in 2 times. That gives me the decimal, but I still have to move it 2 times to the right, add in that 0, and again, that's going to give us 20%. Okay, we've got a couple more. In a poll of 125 people, 75 of them like cake. What percentage of the people polled like cake? Okay, so we know how many people there are, and we know how many of them said they like cake, and we're looking for the percent. So this is a percent box question. Again, these percent word problems are found on page 29 and page 30. In this one, it's total people. They're all people. Some of them like cake. So I'm going to put LC for like cake. We know that there were 125 people total, and we know that 75 of them liked cake. We've got to start at 125, and I don't see a relationship going either way. But I do see that both of these are divisible by 5 or 25. I'm going to go with 25 because that's going to save me some time. 25 goes into 75 3 times, 25, 50, 75. it goes into 125 5 times. 25, 50, 75, 100, 125. Now I know that 5 times 20 is 100. 3 times 20 is 60. So 60% of them liked cake. Last question is just basic percent, fraction decimal percent model here. You've got 100 squares and 40 of them are shaded. You can find problems like this or notes on this on page 26. And they all say 4/10, so we know that part's right. So let's talk about the decimal. This is 40 hundredths, so 40 out of 100, that looks good. This right here, we don't need the 0 on the end, so that really is just 4 hundredths. That would be 4 of them shaded, so no. It also has 4%, and again, percent is out of 100, so that would be 4 shaded out of 100. This is 4.0, as in 4 holes. That would be 4 of these models that are all completely shaded. Same with 400%. 100% is if the whole thing's shaded, so 400% would be 4 of them all completely shaded. And then this one also has the 0.40, so this one is the same here and here, it's the same here and here. The difference is 40% versus 4%. This does have 40 shaded out of 100. This would be if there were only 4 shaded out of 100. So A is your answer on this one. Feel free to rewatch any of these if you need to, or any of my other videos, and I hope you do great on your test.